All right, organic chemistry, often called OChem, is the study of carbon compounds or carbon containing compounds. And so obviously that includes carbon, but also nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. So when you take a look at the periodic table, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and then hydrogen are the four main components of organic chemistry. And so why carbon, of course, is a logical question. And so carbon is the basis of life. So let's check that out. So here's the kind of a chart and where basically most of the mass from your body comes from. And you can see oxygen is actually number one, followed by carbon. And so maybe you're thinking, well, why isn't oxygen kind of the basis of life? Well, most of this oxygen is coming from water. If you think about your body, you're mostly water. And so that water isn't really doing all that much. It's more just kind of the solvent. So we'll say it's the solvent, not really life. Cool. So if you think about something that's living, you think about the kind of smallest part of it, you come up with a cell, right? So let's take a look at a picture of a cell. In the middle of the cell is some DNA, right? The kind of the code of life, if you will. And so here's just a kind of picture of some DNA. So DNA is made out of these bases down here, A, T, C, and G. And then if you look at this kind of gray, black is carbon. And so you can see a huge component of this is carbon, right? Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, right? Those are the four main components. And in this case, we do have some phosphorus as just for the backbone, but mostly it's carbon. So your DNA is carbon-based. Let's think about some other parts of the cell. Another very important component of the cells are enzymes. So as this diagram right here shows, enzymes are kind of the little worker bees of your body. They take in compounds, substrates, do some stuff with them, and then pump out some kind of product. And then here's another kind of more accurate pictorial representation of an enzyme. And so you can see it's all these kinds of pretty little pictures, but what are these enzymes really made out of? Well, if you keep zooming in and zooming in, right, you're going to have different types of structures here. And then if you zoom into the kind of lowest structure, it's what's known as the primary structure. So this is kind of what the individual components of this enzyme are. And so this is made out of amino acids. There's about 20 amino acids in your body. And as you can see, the amino acids are mostly carbon, 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 some nitrogen and oxygen as well. And so this is what makes up the enzymes in your body. It's also what makes up the muscles of your body. So proteins play a huge role in life. And as you can see, they are based in carbon. And then you think about the outside of the cell, you've got your cell membrane, otherwise known as the lipid bilayer. So let's take a look at that. So here's a picture of the lipid bilayer. And so you can see you got this little kind of cartoony picture that you'd see in kind of a biology class. But then if you think about what's the molecule actually look like, that's more shown in this top picture right here. And as you can see, the vast majority of it is carbon. So you can see the individual components of the cell are all made out of carbon. All of life is based out of carbon. And it's not just that. Think about how your brain works. How do you think? How do you feel? Well, it's all based on these chemical reactions going on in your brain. And so these chemical reactions are the transportations of what are called neurotransmitters. So these things go from cell to cell, cause some reactions, and that's what you interpret as feeling, seeing, thinking, all this kind of stuff. And so if you take a look at what those are made out of, right, there's some common neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, all of these kinds of good stuff. And all these little black circles are carbon. And so you can see most of these are carbons. And if you look at the formula, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, right? Those are the components of all of these things. So again, organic chemistry. And then if you think about what you eat, a lot of, the macronutrients of what you eat are fats, which are shown over here. And as you can see, they're mostly carbon. You also eat carbohydrates, which, as you may have guessed at this point, are mostly carbon. And then the last thing you eat is proteins, and proteins are made out of amino acids, which again are carbon-based. And even some of the stuff that you drink. So if you drink some alcohol, that's ethanol. And as you can see, it is mostly carbon. And so at the end of the day, you are a walking, talking bag of organic chemistry in a solvent of water. So if we want to understand life, if we want to understand how we work, how we function, and how we can fix maybe some of our dysfunctions, we have to understand the chemistry of life, which is the chemistry of carbon. But it's not just life. There are plenty of other uses of carbon. So here's one popular example. This is plastics. Pretty much all of the plastics you own are made out of carbon. And so you can see organic chemistry, the study of carbon, is extremely important to life, and not just to life, but to other things. And so that's why it kind of gets its own little subsection of chemistry.